Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Discovering God. We're back. Jeff, how you doing?
I'm back in living color. I'm doing well.
Awesome.
You doing all right?
I'm doing fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Jeff, tell us where people can find you online again.
Yeah. Well, there's two ways you can find me easiest and everything I'm involved in. You can either go to my website, jeffmcclain.com, and it'll show you all the things I'm involved in, or you can go to the web blog host pathos.com, and just search for Jeff McClain or Lead a Quiet Life, and my blog will come up there. And Rip,
Yep.
Your book is being sold.
Yes.
And tell us a little bit more about where we can find it. And this time I'm going to also ask you to describe what you think was the hardest part of the book to write.
So the book is called Shattered,
Yeah.
Surviving and Thriving After the Worst Pains of Life. I would recommend it's on liferichpublishing.com, and it's also available on Amazon. Best thing to do at the moment, search Shattered and search my name along with it.
Yeah, Rip Wahlberg.
Rip Wahlberg. What was the hardest part of the book?
By the way, when I searched for your book one time, Mark Wahlberg also came up.
I did that too.
If you can get Marky Mark and a Funky Bunch to like promote your book, that would be really
How
great.
awesome. Like at Wahlburgers.
Yeah.
Maybe I can do a book signing.
And reading. While people are eating their cheeseburgers
at
and you're telling one of the
Wahlburgers.
saddest
How
stories
cool
ever.
would that would be?
Terrible.
Yeah, exactly. It'd be like kind of
But yeah, one of the hardest parts to write for that book.
I think the hardest part was I wrote, I almost tear up now. I wrote the introduction. No, sorry. I wrote the, the dedication. So this one's dedicated to Anne-Marie. And I read it now and I still get choked up.
Wow.
And I think I wrote like I remember sitting in my office over there and I told Anne-Marie, like, hey, I'm just getting started on the book. She goes, good. She'd been telling me for months and stuff, you got to write it. But she's like, I'm not hanging around while you start, And I went up after probably 45 minutes and I had just written the very first, here's what happened.
Wow.
And then I was like, I started crying and I went upstairs. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is going to be harder than I thought, right? It turned out to be about that, but the book has a really, really, really intense first part, and then it kind of moves on to hopeful after that. I will say it was a little serendipitous. I finished the manuscript about 2 years later on Father's Day, which if you read the book has significance for me. And I can remember finishing the last period, keystroke period, and Anne-Marie opened our front door and looked at me. I put my reading glasses down and I got up and I said, I just finished. And I went over to her and gave her a hug and I just started sobbing.
Yeah.
So even finishing it was, I guess that'd be a little cathartic, but it wasn't hard. It was just a momentous moment.
I asked you that question because when we look at your book and as we encourage people to read it, to learn to walk through their own mourning and grief, I think there's something prophetic about your book in which it's not just here's the resolve that you'll experience, or here's the healing you'll experience, or here's my story, but it is this prophetic call to be honest with the stuff we're carrying and to model authenticity, vulnerability. And your book does that. And I hope that's an outcome of the book as well.
I hope it is too. And I say in the book that I've written my story so that hopefully you'll be able to, and I've shared with you my pain, hopefully so that you'll be able to connect to yours.
Wow. All right. Again, tell us where to find it.
On Amazon.
Yep.
Is the easiest way. I know it's going to be available on like Barnes and Noble and such as well. So it'll be available, especially online in all the places that you can find books.
You'll probably find a link to it in the show notes as well. So make sure you check there.
Yep, absolutely. So Jeff, we wanted to kind of talk today about this is actually your idea.
Hmm.
So do you want to maybe present it and what you're thinking?
Yeah, recently we had a conversation on how inauthentic community was a reason people were leaving the church, or the way that community had become polarized or politicized. And I also wanted us to have the ability to speak to the capacity of community. There's good things that community brings us. I think more than ever, most of us are looking for a place to belong, a place to call home.
Mm-hmm.
And sadly, the church isn't always seen as that place. But I think that I hope through our conversation today that we can speak values to a church gathering or a church community. Now, when I say that, I'm not upholding a certain way of church.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not upholding, what you think of when you think of evangelical church. This might be just people gathering in your home. It might be people in a big church. I don't know, but there is value in gathering with people as the church. And I want us to highlight some of that today.
Is it worth defining what you mean by church when you say as the church?
Yeah.
Big topic. It could be not trying to get there, but just short expression. What does that mean to you?
Yeah.
To gather as the church?
More and more. And this is a term that I wrestled with growing up in the church. I hated when pastors would use this language, but it's continued to ring true for me. As I've been studying First Thessalonians, and we talked about that some last week in our podcast, Paul constantly talks about how he shared life with them,
Mm-hmm.
that he can't wait to get back with them. He even uses the language, "I've been orphaned from you," and we need places where we have what I'll call extended spiritual family, or extended family of spiritual significance, places that we're integrated together in. And so when I talk about the church, I'm talking about representations of the larger church, of Big C Church.
Okay.
And so I'm saying that there needs to be affinity groups, local groups, regional groups, family, friends that are gathering together to be the family of God together, to represent it to each other, to their neighborhood. We'll talk more about this as we go through,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm merely speaking about a community that is edging each other on towards the prize, towards Jesus.
Okay. Yep. Helpful to just be defining the terms and whatnot.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think I would these days I would define church, slight theology, I guess, but as the people of God.
Yeah.
And so to gather as the church, if we're to also fulfill the sending function, then I think the when we gather as you're describing, we are both those that are following Jesus and those that are seeking Jesus.
That's right. That's
right. Maybe not yet willing to give their life to him. Seeking, maybe another synonym would be like investigating Jesus, but ultimately he is who we're seeking.
And that mixture is in the Pauline churches. You have the early churches, which were formed by the apostles in and around Jerusalem, and those churches were mostly Jewish people who had greater theological backgrounds than you and I will ever dream of having. And they meet Jesus, so they're light years ahead of most people. That defines their church. But as Paul moves into Gentile regions, he reaches both Jew and Gentile, Jew and non-Jew. And there's not only an imbalance of what people know, but there are seekers coming in their midst. And Paul even gives recommendations that. James even does that to the Jerusalem churches, right? Beware of the people among you that are less than you, or you see as less. I mean, there's this constant tension in the New Testament where the church is a place for believer and seeker. And that tension over the years in the evangelical world has looked different. We've launched seeker churches, and we've launched discipleship movements, and we've launched welcoming churches, and we've launched churches that are old and traditional and seem very closed if you're not like them. And neither of them, all of those, miss the mark on what we see community being and doing and living as in the New Testament.
Yeah. So as we jump into this, I want to make sure that I preface again when we're saying this, we're not saying the church is doing a really crummy job.
Not
We're
at
not
all.
trying to
Right.
speak so negatively about the church, like, and however it presents itself. So we're not trying to drag something down and stand on its shoulders that we've dragged down. Um, we're like,
We're trying to
you're
convince you
pastoring a
of the
church,
I
and I'm
pastor
attending a
a
church.
church from 1860. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
1760. It's a old church, but I think our hope is that you'll get some good ideas on why. I mean, church can be weird.
hmm
Community can be weird. Relationship can be weird. Why it's worth pushing past the weirdness and what you're going to experience if you do.
And is part of what you're thinking, because some of it is mine, but is part of what you're thinking about this, that to to be the church can be that there are more expressions of it than than the singularity with which it's done in
Yeah.
our society.
I have no image of what the ideal church should look like in my mind.
Okay.
It can look like people gathering in a coffee house, others in a home. It can look like a church is meeting a cathedral that's 1,000 years. I mean, all of these are beautiful expressions.
So I'm asking that again just to clarify, but because we're having discussions, and this is more to be able to have a discussion toward where I kind of see like the you asked me a while ago, what's the demographic or what's the kind of audience? You said audience. And I always envision the audience at this point being how I use the language, the next generation and those far from faith. And so it's what we're willing to do is just go, well, what is this, and what does it look like to if you think outside the box, I guess. And so let me ask you this. We'll start here. Why does this matter to you?
Yeah. It matters to me because I think what makes the difference between a follower of Jesus who discovers their identity and the one who doesn't, the one who learns to be fruitful and the one that doesn't, the one who grows in greater intimacy with Jesus versus the one that doesn't, is community. I think that the anchoring of community is essential. The word grace, as it would be used throughout Hebrew, carries with it the idea of God's face with it. In community, we are meant to look at each other, to see the face of God in each other, right? We're told that wherever two or more are gathered, Jesus says, hey, I'm going to be there among you. But the reality is God's face, his image, is with us in community, and we reveal God to each other. And so I see community as a way of anchoring, as a way of seeing the face of God. I think it's a place of accountability where we grow together, where we keep each other accountable, pruned. I also think it's a place of great encouragement. And I also think that for the most part, all of us are longing for deep held relationships. I think that the things that get us into trouble the most in our lives are the ways that we pursue isms or the way we pursue certain pursuits, hoping they will meet the need of community.
Mm-hmm.
And, drug addiction, whatever we want to call it, alcoholism, these things are because there's a vacancy in our life that community is meant to fill. And I think that when we can discover the benefits of community, it saves us a world of trouble of the other places we look for it.
Yeah. I think one of the things it seems that it provides in what you're describing, I hear what I believe are like echoes of Anne Marie. Even she says, "Life on life." It's about doing life on life, like doing life
use that
together
same language.
and life on life.
Life on life.
And I do see the value in that. It is a fulfilling thing, right?
Yeah.
To have. In fact, we're going to be going back to Connecticut, and we're going to see a number of friends like that we hadn't seen, that we were doing, we were in church with and doing life together with for a long period of time. And it's because it's that endearing. So
there's something beautiful about when life is shared between people that are not related, in a way though that it feels as if you are related. And I feel that our church community is discovering that. I look forward to being in community with our people on a Sunday morning to share life. I mean, we literally share what we're walking through in the middle of church. And I think there's something unique about the smaller church where life on life is done even more intimately. And for some of us, we need that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, it's just really good.
I want to shoot down a few quotes, if I can, of some of my favorite
Run them down.
community things, right?
Go for it.
Stanley Hauerwas said, "Saints," he's speaking to followers of Jesus, "cannot exist without community, as they require, like all of us, nurturing by a people who, while often unfaithful, preserve the habits necessary to learn the story of God." And so he speaks to the way that we, when we're together, develop habits in each other that keep us on the journey towards God.
The learning together.
Yeah, it's learning together.
Invaluable, and I think that's part of what deepens
the
connection, the learning together.
So often we say it's where we go to learn or to be fed, and more I'm seeing the church. There's a psychiatrist by the name of Kurt Thompson, and he says the church, or the local representation of it, needs to be a confessional community where we pour out what we're dealing with, and we're honest with each other and talk about it. And I also think it just needs to become a community where we journey through life together, where we're willing to pick each other up, where we're looking to encourage, equip, and empower each other. And a lot of that is carrying, as I said, the image of Jesus. C.S. Lewis says he works on all of us in different ways, but above all, he works on us through each other. Men and women are mirrors or carriers of Christ to other men and women. And usually it's those that bring him, Jesus, closer to us, right? And he says that is why the church, the whole body of Christians, showing Jesus to one another is so important. He says it's so easy to think about the church, and he's writing this years ago, as different objects: education, buildings, missions, services. But the church exists for no other purpose than to draw men to Christ and to make them little Christ. One of my favorite quotes. Dallas Willard, one more. He says, "The natural condition of life for human beings is one of reciprocal rootedness in others." In other words, we don't know who we are unless we're in a rooted community with another person. And I think that's true. We actualize ourselves in other people. We see ourselves in other people. Other people model things for us. Our paradigms are stretched by others. And there is a reciprocal, right? It's coming from both sides. It's not top-down community. It's a reciprocal rootedness in others. And I just love those quotes about community.
Reciprocal. Yeah, I've never heard that.
Willard was a great wordsmith.
Yeah, for sure. It's probably so much, like, very dense.
Yes.
Like, I got to ponder that.
I would have to write a paragraph to say that. Yeah.
You know, absolutely. Those are really good. I'm thinking, as you're saying that, Jeff, of the people that I have in my life. You, and just to be honest, not because you're sitting here, but you're one of them that have, like, I've done some of the growth of ministry together with by doing life on life. Even we may have served together, we may have not served together, but we were interacting collegially at no matter what, right? And I find that it's been the biggest blessing to have people like yourself and a couple others. I love how you say double L Phil and so on, because in that growing together, in the growing in Jesus, you'll have challenged me in my thinking, but you didn't try to change me.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
And I wonder if that's one of the things that people get scared of. I know I will have been scared of that. That if we do this, are they going to try to change me? I'm willing to be challenged. And I think it's loving to be able to challenge while not force someone to change.
Yeah.
Like, you didn't accept me.
Yeah.
Meaning you accepted me regardless if I agreed with you.
And vice versa. You accepted me, I think,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh,
even
for
when I
sure.
have
Yes, of
ideas.
course. Of
When
course.
yes,
Right. But I think that's the way I'm trying to describe the not change factor.
you and I both were in a vineyard church together, one that you
Hmm.
pastored, and you have freely shown and shared on this show what it was like pastoring a smaller church and what it meant to close a church. But there was a huge highlight in that as well. So I consider myself as being blessed to have been on the bookends of the church. So I was there
Mm.
in the beginning and at the end. And my kids were able to join with me at the end. And even though they love our church now and they look forward to going, I mean, they get excited to go, they still talk about how they miss the vineyard.
Wow.
And by that point, our numbers had dwindled greatly.
Hmm.
Making ends meet was impossible. There
Hmm.
was difficulty at play. And as I talk with them, I realized that they experienced the thing in that church community that kept me in that church community at the start of it, why I was willing to walk towards faith with the people at the beginning that I did. And it was the way community was modeled. So despite the problematic stuff, multiple times a month, we all went out to eat together.
Hmm.
Multiple times a month, we'd sit around talking. There was conversations and gatherings that happened outside of Sunday morning, life on life, so much so that many of those people still interact with each other at some level. You
Hmm.
see many of them often. There's a few of them that when they're not going to make their church, they ended up showing up in our church and saying hi.
Yep.
And there is a tangible bond that is
Mhm.
felt when they enter the room. And I see it with my kids too as they run up to embrace it. And so,
Hmm.
for all the difficulty we talk about, like there was something that God did among those people while you were leading too that created an amazing bond of collaboration
Hmm.
where I really think people felt seen and heard. And I think that's why it was so hard to close down the church for many because of that connection. I mean, all of us long for a sense of community and belonging. And the
Yeah.
church can be that. And I just shared an example of that.
So now we've got. I appreciate that, by the way.
Yeah.
But looking at, I'm not a great statistics guy. I think you love the statistics more. I'm just not good with. I don't gravitate toward them easily.
I like them, but I don't always trust them either.
Sure. So Gallup just said in March of 21, church membership is down 50%, below 50% of
Wow.
society for the first time, historically or since those kind of records, right? So my question is this: we've got church attendance down. I read another article by Barron's. That was it. Started with a B. Barron's,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Private club membership is up after COVID.
That blows my mind.
Yeah, all over the place.
Yeah.
And it's in the next generation. It's starting to increase. People looking for connection.
Yeah.
Right, a place to belong, connect, and so forth. Now they may have other kinds of financial ambitions with it and so forth, but private club membership up, church attendance down. Does the church have anything to offer to that mindset in this generation?
Yeah.
And I say that specifically because, of course, we always have the gospel. You can't just say, well, it's the Jesus answer, right? But it's, does the church have something that's valuable to offer to the generation that is now feeling disconnected, but also doesn't believe that the church is where they can find it?
Yeah. I think I'm going to give you a quick list of what I think the church offers. And I'm doing that for those that may not be in the church and say, well, what would the church offer me? But I'm also saying it, and I hope those that are in the church will listen to this list and realize there's something that we can offer. I mean, the one thing, there's so many things that churches try to do: provide medical care, provide debt counseling, provide car giveaways, whatever you want. I mean, we've tried everything under the sun. The one thing we can never outsource, the one thing we can never change is that we alone hold the story of Jesus. And we can't forget that. And so we have to begin to ask contextualized questions. How do we engage people with that message in a way that works. So it may mean that we have to change our approach. But this is what I think church offers us and what we need to focus on. One, it is a place still of community. So capitalize on that. Like,
Hmm.
capitalize that it is a place to be known, to be seen, to be heard. And if your church isn't giving space to be seen or heard or valued, then there's something wrong, because that's the key of who we can be as a
Hmm.
people, a place to belong. Believe it or not, it's a place of opportunity for a sense of mission or volunteer work, community service. People want to give back.
Hmm.
Create opportunities to see the mission of God advanced by creating opportunities for this. It's still a place of spiritual guidance and support. If there, you're not going to find that by belonging to Planet Fitness, all right? Some people say, "Hey, I tried the church. It was messy. I didn't like it." As Henry Nouwen says, the church is the place where you're forced to be friends with the person you wouldn't get along with normally. I mean, that's the reality. But at the end of the day, we don't throw out our Planet Fitness memberships when we're not working out enough, or we see larger people in the gym.
Because it just wasn't working
Yeah,
for
just
me.
and we
Yeah.
don't do that, right? And
Yeah.
so it is still a place of moral guidance and principles. It's a place for worship and to explore religious practices. There's an opportunity for training and mentorship and leadership. I mean, that's what another thing that kept me in the church is a pastor was willing to take me under his wing, and that we need to do more of that. And
Hmm.
I think these things speak to the value of who we can still be as a church.
Yeah. I'm seeing a lot of notes that I made that connect, echo your
Yeah,
sentiment, right? I'm thinking now in terms of what are the various ways we can not just wait for people to come inside our walls, but how can we bring it to where people are at if they're not going to come? And so there's a phrase, I'll try to get it, that this makes sense to me. See if it makes sense to you. We have taken the approach of one expression with many beliefs. So you got to come inside the door on a Sunday morning, but you can come to all these different places that believe different variations of the same thing. We call that denominations.
hmm
I think the kingdom of God and the way that maybe the next generation is looking for it is one belief with many expressions.
agreed.
Maybe it's you don't have to come inside our door and you're stuck in the red light district, so the right person would come to you
Yeah,
and your friends. Or, oh, you're, somehow in the home and your family would never come to church, but you want to hear something and your whole family comes to meet this person at the home, and so forth. And discipling starts happening there versus waiting for it to be done inside the walls.
in the story of Mark, Jesus starts his ministry in a synagogue, but he doesn't invite anyone to it. And the synagogue was a place of conversation. In that day, it was a place to have people that understood the scriptures in unique ways to speak, to share their opinions. There was usually a public takeaway, which why at the beginning of Mark, Jesus healing a demon in the middle of a synagogue is quite normal. It was a practical learning experience for that they would have wanted in that day. But notice, he doesn't keep his ministry ever in a synagogue. Or for us, he would have kept his ministry in the church, right?
Mm.
And from that point on, he spends times on hillsides, in cities, in parties, in homes, and it's those places that he invites people to. A couple years ago, and I wish I could remember the number. I kind of counted how many times Jesus joined a party at somebody's house, and it was kind of a large amount of
Hmm.
times. I mean, he gets invited to a Pharisee's house. And he always seems to find the one person, like a prostitute, that's there that shouldn't be there, that
Mm.
he engages, right? And so, to me, it is time for the church to start asking different questions of not how do we get people to experience the benefits of our community, but how do we give them a foretaste of what's to come in heaven, that sort of community, and
Mm.
how does our community take that on a road, not as a road show, not as a
Right.
sideshow, but I mean, when we watch a trailer for a movie, We get excited for that movie if it's a good trailer, because it's a foretaste of what we're going to experience. We need to find ways to join the parties in our neighborhoods, to offer community where people can belong without judgment, so that they get a foretaste of who Jesus is. And that's what's going to lead to greater sense of community and belonging in community for us as a church.
Yeah. I think if we can think outside the box,
Yeah.
think outside the walls, I think, like Jesus said, the opportunities are like, the harvest is plentiful there. Yeah. And I think it's the perspective that we're not seeing that the harvest is plentiful because they left the walls. And there's other studies that I've listened to and whatnot, and they're all like, people are willing to still talk about Jesus.
Yeah. The church
may not be willing to come inside the wall.
The church community gathered will only be as good as we as individuals are willing to be the church community in the places that we live, work, and play. If we're willing to represent that sense of belonging with those that we rub shoulders with on a day-to-day in the non-sacred space. I mean, I think everything's sacred, but in the non-worship spaces, that is how people are going to see that community really matters in the church.
Yeah, yeah. Well, good, man.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you.
Any final thoughts?
No. Push through the messiness. Church can offer a place.
That's a good final thought right there.
That's a good one.
Folks, we're glad you've joined us. And give us a like, share it out on Facebook, Instagram, anywhere else. Subscribe on YouTube. That'd be awesome. And we hope that you will go and read the Bible. Find a community of faith. Find a place to just sit and study God's word together with other people. Come face to face with God by coming face to face with his word. Have a great day.